Hey everybody, in this video we're going to show you how to use blueprints to add some interactivity to your game. The way we're going to start this off is I have an object here which is a blueprint, I have a table, I have what's called a trigger volume here, and then an end cap that we want to use to raise up when this table comes into this trigger volume. So let me show you what that looks like first. So if I walk over here, you can see that I'm going to walk into that trigger volume with my character, but then when I go to the table and knock the table into the trigger volume, the door opens and we get some debug output on this screen. Okay, so how's that going to work? Well, let's show you back where we started from. So we just have this table here. There's nothing special about it. The other thing we want to do is I'm going to add in one of my level end caps for this level, and I'm just going to put it right around there, and actually I'm going to rotate it around just so the other side is facing us. Move it back a little bit so that we have a little bit of room. That looks good right there. Alright, so if you remember, we had a trigger volume here, and the way that we get the trigger volumes is we go over here to the right, or excuse me, the left, and under volumes, down at the bottom, we have all these other kinds of trigger, all the different types of volumes. And the one that we're interested in is a trigger volume, so we can bring this in. And of course, we can resize this if we want to. We can make it slightly longer if we wanted to do it that way, or make it kind of skinny. I'm going to put that. Make sure that it's right in front of our table here, so that we can just knock the table into the trigger volume and have that just work. Okay, so the next thing that we need is a blueprint to basically say when this table or my character enters this trigger volume to simply raise up this wall. And so to do that, I am going to go into my blueprints folder just to keep everything organized. I got a couple of blueprints in here already. Right click, go up to blueprint class, and this will put it in the current folder that I'm in where I right clicked. And once you select blueprint class, it's going to ask you what class you want to inherit from, or what the parent class is for this. And we're going to select actor. Everything in our scene, if you remember, is an actor, and a pawn is some kind of movable or possessable character, and then we have a subclass of that called character, and a couple other ones down here as well. So for right now, we're going to use actor. I'm just going to create a new blueprint here, and I'm just going to do, I'm just going to call this, let's call it raise object on trigger. And I'm going to do underscore BP just to let us know that that's a blueprint, and it helps when we're searching for it. Okay, so we have this blueprint that we've created, and there's not going to be anything in it currently, but what I do want to do is just create an instance of my blueprint by just dragging it into the scene. Now in this particular case, our blueprint is not going to have any meshes associated with it. In other cases, you may attach this blueprint to other objects or insert meshes into that object for the blueprint to modify itself, namely those meshes. What we're going to do instead is we're going to have this blueprint that's been instantiated in our scene to modify this door or this wall based on events that happen with this trigger. So the trigger is going to let our blueprint know that something has come inside of it, and then it's going to tell this wall, which is an independent object, to go ahead and raise up. Okay, so whenever anything goes into our trigger, that's when we get an event for our blueprint. So let's go ahead and open up our blueprint editor. And make this bigger. Alright, so what you see is just a circle placeholder here, so you can see it in our game mode when we have just where it is instantiated, so we can go ahead and select it and then edit it, any of its properties that we have here. Okay, so let's go back to our blueprint. And we're going to have these 3 tabs up here. One is the viewport. So again, if we wanted to add any objects in here like meshes or other things, we could add it and construct it, for example, and then have the blueprint modify itself. We have a construction script where once it gets instantiated, it can run some of these nodes. And then finally, we have our event graph where we're going to spend most of our time. And so we have the begin play event that happens after the object has been instantiated, but when the game starts playing. We have another one for event actor begin overlap, and this is going to say that when the blueprint itself has overlap, it is overlapping some other actor, that event gets called. And then finally, we have event tick, where every time the frame gets refreshed, namely 60 to 120 times a second, this will get called that many times. All right, so what we want to do is we actually want to ensure that our trigger, when that sends us an event, that we get notified of that. But we need to let the blueprint know about that trigger. And so the easiest way to do that is just go over here to variables, and we're going to add a variable or a reference to that trigger. And so for this one, I'm just going to simply call it trigger. And by default, in this particular case, it's a Boolean. If you hover your mouse over there, you can see that it's a Boolean. If you go over to the inspector, once this is selected, it will have more information. We can change the type of our variable here. And because this is a trigger volume, and I want a reference to a trigger volume, I can just start typing in trigger and volume, and it should come up here. And we have a couple other options that we want to, if we want to select that there. But we want to be able to be notified of different events, and namely the on actor begin overlap. And so that'll tell us that some actor has overlapped or began to overlap our trigger volume. Okay, so we add this event to our event graph here, and I'll just put it at the bottom. And the next thing we want to do before we start this whole process is make sure that our trigger, or our blueprint, knows about our trigger volume. And so if you click on our blueprint, we don't see any way in this inspector to let the blueprint know about this trigger volume. So let's go back to our event, our blueprint editor, and under trigger, what we can do is we can make this visible in the editor. So if I click the I then have to hit compile. And if you ever see the star up in here where the name is, that means it's not saved. So go ahead and save it. Go back to our editor here. And now we have under default a trigger reference. And right now it's set to none. And if I drop this down, we can see that I have a couple trigger volumes in here. And I don't know which one it is off the top of my head because I didn't name it properly. I could browse the content browser, or I could pick it from the scene. I'm just going to go ahead and pick it from the scene because it's right here. Make sure on your volumes that you select one of these edges, because otherwise in the middle it won't get selected. And if I try to select anything else that's not a trigger volume, it'll tell me that I won't be able to select those objects. So make sure it's on the trigger volume. You can see the eyedropper. Click that, and now we've selected our trigger volume here. This default category, we can also change that to be a little bit more descriptive. And that's going to go here in our inspector under category. And I can just call these references or whatever you want to call it. Hit enter. Compile, and go back to our editor, and you can see that now instead of default, it changes to references. And so this is a nice way to organize, if you have very many variables to expose in this editor, to organize that in such a way that if you want to, reduce that or hide that away, we can. Okay, so now that our blueprint knows about our trigger volume, and our trigger volume can then send events to our blueprint, let's go ahead and test this really quickly to make sure we have everything lined up and all of our ducks in a row. So on our actor begin overlap, namely the trigger, it's going to have this execution pin. So let's drag this out, and I'm going to just test this. So let me show you how to test this real quick. Just type in print, which is in the menu that pops up after we drag that out. So if we drag that out and drop it, this menu will come up. Type in print. Down here, select print string. And I'm going to print out just a simple string, and this will go ahead and print it out to the screen. And we can say hello, or we can say trigger does have overlap event. And this will let us know that this event has been triggered. This execution pin has gone into the print string node, and then this value will get printed. And then we can have some other any other execution after that. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile that. Switch back to our editor. And now when anything enters this trigger zone, we should see some debug messages up here. Let's go ahead and play this and see if that's true. So I'm just going to walk over here. And indeed, trigger does have overlap event. It comes up for 2 seconds. If I leave that trigger volume and then go back into the trigger event, so we can see that. And then if we knock over our table into it, you can also see that that also triggers our event. Okay, so this is pretty cool. We have the ability to now execute code based on this overlap. So if this is a pressure plate or some kind of switch to activate something, and we're going to raise our door with this. So I can keep this print string just so I know that something's happening. I'm going to pull this other exec pin out. And what I want to do for this one is I want to actually start moving the door. And so we can use the move to or move component to, and that will allow us to move a particular component. And let me go ahead and resize this a little bit and move this over. Okay, so for our move component to, we have a bunch of input pins that we can plug stuff into, and then we have a completed exec pin that comes out of here. So the first parameter, if you want to think about it that way, of this function is a component to actually move. The next parameter is the target relative location. So relative to the location that it's currently at, where do you want to move this to? The next is target relative rotation. So if we wanted to rotate it along any one of these axes, we could. We could also do some easing and ease in and out. And these are just Booleans to let it know to yes, go ahead and ease out, or yes, go ahead and ease in. We have the amount of time over which to move. And so we can hard code this. Right now it's at 0.2. And we can hard code it with another variable. And then we have a shortest rotation path, and we're not going to worry about that one right now. But what I need right now is the component to actually move it to, and we don't have any reference to that wall yet, nor do we have any meshes that we would want to or could move as well. So if you did have a mesh within the viewport, let me just show you how that works really quickly. If I wanted to take, let's go to our meshes and take this chair, for instance, go over to our blueprint and just drop it in here. Now this chair, if we go to our event graph, we can actually add that chair as a movable object to our component. Okay, so that's what I mean when we add a mesh to our blueprint. Let's get rid of that real quick, and then also this one as well by hitting delete on both of those. What I really want is to get a mesh or an actor outside of our blueprint object. So I need a reference to it, and just like our trigger, we need to create a mesh, an actor. So I'm going to say actor to move, and this is going to be visible in our editor. So I'm going to click on this eye to open the eye so it's visible. And the tooltip that I'm getting here is variable is public, but it's missing a tooltip, and that should have this one as well. So if I move that if I click on that, we can actually put in a tooltip for the actor to move. And so I'm just going to say the actor to move up. And we do the same thing with the trigger if we want to. We can just say trigger to activate the movement of the door or wall or whatever you want to call it. Okay, and so once those two have tooltips, we can then see, and I haven't compiled that yet, so I have to go back and recompile this. Give it a second. Okay, and then once that's there, we have the reference, which I renamed that category, but I didn't rename the actor to move, so by default it goes under the default tab. And if I select this one, we can see that I also did not set the type, and so it just takes the type of the previous variable that you added, and namely these are trigger volumes. But if I do hover over the name here, it'll show me the tooltip that I typed in. So this is a really nice way of exposing functionality to maybe level designers that are working on your team in order to give them more information just based on, if you're reading the label, trigger might not be enough, but if you hover over it, trigger to activate the movement of the door, especially if you have more than one trigger. Okay, so let me go ahead and fix the bugs that I have in here. So actor to move is actually going to be a type actor. I don't see it currently in here, so let's go ahead and type in actor here. And we're just going to select the first one there. Now this is of type actor. Now let's go ahead and change that category to references, compile. We can also save it, go back, and now we should have actor to move. If we drop these down, we have all the actors in our scene, which is quite a few, but I'm going to select the eyedropper and select the actor to move, in which case this is a wall. Okay, the next thing we want to make sure is that when we select our wall, that it is movable. By default, these things are static because that's the way that it is more efficient. It's just to create more static objects. And that way the engine knows that it doesn't really have to do anything because that object will never move. But because we are moving it, we want to make it movable. So make sure we do it that way. And we're going to go ahead and hit save. Just make sure everything is saved. And let's now go ahead and input the logic to move our component or our wall up. Okay, so let's go ahead and see where we're at. So right now, we know that our trigger volume is getting triggered. And after that print statement, after that happens, we're going to start the movement of our wall up. Now, the input for this component, this function, we need as a component, now that we have a reference to the actor to move, I can drag in from my variable and do a getter to get that reference that we've created. And you can see that this is a blue pin that matches to this object. But when I try to do that, the actor reference is not compatible with the scene component reference. And so what I actually have to do first is I have to get the root component of this object. And so what I'm going to do is drag it right about there, and it's going to drop up this add menu. And I need the component within that actor. I don't want the actor itself. I actually want the component, namely the wall. And so if your actor has multiple meshes in it, this could get a little complicated. So just keep that in mind. But I want to get the root component, so I'm just going to type in get component, and it should have get root component there. And then this will come back as a scene component reference, which is what this input is actually asking for. Okay, so just one kind of intermediary step to translate this, or actually go inside of this object and grab the scene root component from this actor. And so again, that's all we have to do, and that'll grab the scene, like basically what the equivalent of this is, I believe. Okay, so once we're able to get the reference, pass it in here, we have to tell it the relative location in order to move it up. So let's try something. Let's try getting the location of our actor. So we're just going to simply type in get location, and it's going to say get actor location. We could try that, but if you remember, we really want the root component of it, so something better would be to delete that and move this over. I'm going to actually pull it out from here, because again, we want to get that root component, which is returned from this actor. Now if we do get location, we have two variables that are available to us. We have get absolute location and get relative location. If you remember from the pin that's over here, the pin is kind of an orange color, and based on, if I type that in again, get location, this get absolute location is of a different type, and so we actually want this one. So if I click on this, you see that this orange pin matches up to this. So hopefully that kind of helps. And so if I plug that in, what this is essentially saying is after the print string statement, it's going to move this object. The actor to move is piped into the component, so it's going to move that particular component. And it's going to move it to this relative location. Well, the relative location that we have set up right now is the actor's, at least the root component's current location. So we're just piping in the same exact location. Nothing's going to happen, and so we're not going to see any results. The next parameter I want to talk about real quick is the open time. I want to put this to something a little bit higher than 0.2. Let's say 3 seconds should be okay. And let's move this over so we have a little bit of more room so that we can fix this here. I'm going to hold down Alt and then click to disconnect that line. And then I'm going to drag in, actually let me give myself a little bit more room than that. I want to change this value. So this value that comes out is going to be the relative location of the actor to move variable that we have referenced. And again, that's going to be our wall. So our relative location we want to change. So let's see if we can change this by transforming it. This is what we call in 3D, right? And you can do a transform location, and you can type that in, or once you kind of see it in the list here, we're going to call this function. So this is now a new function. It's going to pipe in the return value of this, this root component's relative location, transform location. If you're familiar with Java or any C-based language like that, the actor to move is our variable or our reference. And in that C-based code, we would do actor to move dot get root component. And then since it's a return value, we do another dot and then maybe call relative location on that, dot, transform location, pass in two variables here, and do some things with that. So the return value. So you can see kind of how this would be formed in code just using dot notation. Or in C++, we would use the pointer dereference, the arrow, that way. And I'll show you that in future stuff. But the transform location, we're going to transform that with our t. And what results from that is the return value, and then we want to actually pass that into this one here. Okay, so what goes here for t? Well, this is a transform, and it's asking for a transform, and instead of me going ahead and looking that up in the add menu, I'm just going to simply drag this parameter out and say place new node, and we can say promote to a variable, or I can just say transform, because I know it's going to be a transform. And scroll down in the list until you see make transform, because we actually just want to go ahead and pretty much just hardwire the numbers of the transform in. So let me go ahead and again make a little bit more room. This thing gets a little messy after a while. We're going to take the relative location wherever the wall currently resides, and we want to add, let's say, 4 meters to the height. And actually I believe our walls are 3 meters, so let's go ahead and add 300 centimeters because these values are in centimeters. Just hit enter on that to save it. We can pipe in some other variables or add some variables over here and pipe those into this and get a little bit more dynamic, but we're going to hard code that for right now. All right, so let's look at what we've just done. Kind of a mess, but this isn't the worst of it. We have a trigger that gets overlapped. When that happens, we can do a print statement, or I could just bypass that and print that out here. But I like my print statements because it tells me that everything is working as it should. And I can even pull out print statements from here and then pipe in these values from these nodes and pipe them in here to see what the value of these as I go. But what we're doing again after that print statement, moving the component, which component, follow it back, the root component of actor to move. We are piping in a target relative location to move it to. Again, following that back, we're doing a transform location from a current location to a new location. And what that location is 300 centimeters in the up or Z direction. And we just had to get the relative value out of the component, which is that little node. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of conversion there. All right, so let's save that before anything happens to it. Make sure we compile because we've made changes to our nodes. Go back to our editor and let's see what happens. Make sure everything is hooked up, so I'm going to actually select my blueprint. And so when this trigger volume gets overlapped, we're going to move NCAP, level NCAP 12, which I believe is still this one. Yep. All right, let's give it a go. Press play and walk in here. And okay, well that seemed to also rotate the wall there, but I'm not too concerned about that at the moment. It did indeed lift it up as well. And yeah, so let's go ahead and test that one more time with the table, just to make sure the table's working, which it should. And didn't push that far enough. There we go. Okay, and again, for some reason it is rotating there. But no big deal. So we're going to take a look at our well, the next thing we want to do is make sure that, like in the demo that I gave at the beginning, that only the table triggers that trigger, so we don't get any notification or events happen when our player goes into it. And so you might think about this as stacking boxes on a pressure plate or something similar like that, where yeah, the player may be able to stand on the pressure plate and maybe they're heavy enough, but we really want to stack like this table, and only the table will activate it. So how do we do that? We're gonna copy or highlight everything here, hold down shift to select that missing piece. I'm gonna move this all over here. And actually what I also want to do while this is selected, I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to collapse it to let's see, actually I want to just create a comment from selection. What that'll do is just wrap this in a nice comment box, and I'll say move actor up. So it's a way for you to comment your messy node system, and then I can grab this entire comment section over so that we have room here. And so as you kind of zoom out, you can see what each section of your nodes do. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, again, ensure that only the table activates the player. And this is kind of something similar to collision filtering, though that's slightly different, where we can say only actors or only certain physic bodies will activate this particular trigger. But we're going to do it in code just to show you that. And so I'm actually going to Alt-click to remove that. And instead I'm going to pull this out, and I want to pull this out into something that says if the overlapping actor is not a player pawn, which is what we're currently using as our third-person controller, if it is not of that type, then go ahead and open the door. So if it is not of that type, go ahead and open the door, meaning that something else has entered that area. Okay, so that would in code be an if statement, and I can type in if, and the thing that comes up is a branch, and that's actually what we want, is an if-else statement, or a branch that if the Boolean that we pass into it is true or false, what happens. All right, so as I mentioned, it has a condition. Let me zoom in here so you can see this. And the condition is either going to be true or false. We can actually hard code that and for testing purposes, I assume, or we can pipe in a condition here. And so we have to create that condition. And the way that we create that condition is we're going to say, okay, which other actor was overlapped? This first pin here is the overlapped actor, meaning the trigger itself. You can have these be a little bit more generic, and then you can define, okay, was it trigger 1, was it trigger 2, whatever, and you can determine that from this pin. But I'm more interested in what actually overlapped this particular trigger. So I'm going to pull this out, and I want to get this into a Boolean state. So we go from actor to Boolean. And so for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the class name because I want to know if it's a pawn. And so that's just get class, and there it is. It's still not a Boolean, obviously, but the return value for this is the class actor. And so we can do a test on this, and we can say, hey, is this class that has currently overlapped, is this of a certain type, or is it a child of a parent class, namely that pawn class? And so I want to see if it is a child of the pawn class, and we can just do class is child of, and it kind of came up right here, but you can say is class. Hopefully you can just find it. You can type that in any way you want to, and this is what we need. Class is child of, because this one will say, yes, it is either a child of that class or it is not a child of that class, and that's going to be a Boolean value. So I'm going to immediately pipe this into our condition, but then I have to select which parent class it is. And again, I can pull this from a variable, maybe one variable that I have here, that you allow your designers to select or whatever. And that makes it really powerful, because then I can say only activate on actors, or only activate on pawns, or only activate on my custom class that I've created. Okay, so that would be very powerful, but for this one we have 2,452 items that we can select from, so you can get as specific as you want. For us, I'm just looking for the regular pawn class. We might have to scroll down a little bit just to find pawn, and then great. All right, so when this is false, meaning it is not a child of the pawn class or everything else besides the pawn, we want this to execute. We want our whole move actor up sequence to begin, again, on the false statement. So when the table, so what it'll do is it'll say, okay, the table has overlapped. What class is our table? It is of type pawn. It is of type actor. Is that a child of pawn? No. Actor is not a child of pawn, just the reverse. Pawn is a child of actor, so that comes out as false. When that comes out as false, it follows this this line of execution. We could also have another line of execution for that, and that's why it's called a branch. Okay, so enough talk. Let's see if this actually works. We're going to hit compile, save it just to make sure that everything's good there. We're going to hit play, and we're going to test this out by walking into this volume, and that's not currently working, so that's great. But let's see if our table works. Yep, indeed. I just have to push it far enough, and there our wall goes. And yeah, and that's basically how you control triggers and what objects go into triggers. Let me switch back to my my blueprint so you can see again what's going on here. Let me zoom out. So when our overlapping object is not a pawn, go ahead and move the actor up. And so I'm going to select those. I'm going to right click again, go down here and say create comment from selection. I'm going to zoom in. And this comment is check to make sure it is not a pawn. Perfect. And let's kind of scooch this in here. Maybe kind of stack that a little bit there. And then we can resize this a little bit if we want to. Yeah, we can move the whole object over here. Okay, so then our logic becomes check to make sure it is not a pawn. If not, move actor up. Okay, and I did kind of sort of change the code, so it asked me to do that. All right, so I hope you found that useful, and we'll be doing some more videos like this and making this a little bit more customizable, a lot more powerful, and doing other things than raising this up as well. So again, hope you found this useful, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.